We love to read a book that matches just the vibe we are feeling at that moment. So let's find that book. Hello and welcome to Kai's Quarters, my quarters. And today I wanted to browse this subreddit called BooksThatFeelLikeThis. And in that subreddit, people post all sorts of images. They could be art, street photography, or vibes from a movie, some screenshots. It could be anything as long as that poster likes the vibe of it. And then they post those images asking for some book recommendations. So what we're gonna do is browse that subreddit, and I haven't seen any of the latest posts or anything, so let's just find some recommendations together. Of course, I won't read the comments, instead I will recommend those books. So there is the page, and let's see what we find, okay? Romance between princess and her lady in waiting. A princess, though. I adore her. She was to me what a religious figure is to what most faithful worshippers. Okay, I think I know what to recommend with this. I'm feeling the vibe of Carmilla. Carmilla by Sheridan Fanu. It's a classic with a female vampire, and she has this sort of fixation with another young lady. And there is this incredibly obvious sapphic vibe to it, where she tries to seduce her, and they develop this sort of relationship that's very close to one another. And I found that it's that sort of relationship in which it feels like nobody could ever bring them apart, you know? It's almost like they are replacing a partner, or is somebody's first partner in a way, in that sense of really close, intimate relationship. And in Carmilla, the vampire Carmilla tells this very young, very innocent girl just how much she loves her and wants to stay with her forever, and wants to sleep in the same room as her, in the same bedroom as she does. And of course, it comes to a point where the parents start to worry, and you can see that double meaning there. And it is a story about sexual awakening, is what I would say. And we see the perspective of that young, innocent girl and how much the experience with Carmilla changes her. Let's see what else we have. Books that have this vibe. Okay, so no real definition. Look at Barnes. Okay, so a sort of female community. Okay, just a lot of gossiping. Oh, shit. Okay, I know exactly what to recommend then. Nena, tienes que quitarte. Right, the book I will be recommending is The House of Bernarda Alba. And that book is a Spanish classic from the 1930s, and it does take place in Spain. It takes place in a village, actually, in a very small village from the 30s in Andalusia, if I'm not wrong. And what's interesting is that we see everything from the perspective of a really matriarchal family. There is this very religious and widow woman, her 5 daughters, her mother, and the female service. So it's especially notable because all the main characters are women. The author is a man, and he talks about the female experience back then, because women were not even listened and could barely publish anything. So the matriarch of this family is very aware of her place in society and what she must do, and the respect that this family has to have in the eyes of everybody else, especially the neighbor, because in this neighbor everybody knows each other, and so you have to look out for any relationships and gossips about her daughters, if they're seeing somebody else, and that is not acceptable at the time. So we see the oppression that family has to go through and how cohibited they feel because of this mother. But at the same time, you're reading it nowadays and you know what that mother is the way she is. But still, that has some consequences, some irreparable consequences in the link that she has with her daughters, because they are going to blame her and feel resentment towards her. So there is this take on all these different family members, and everything is very nuanced, of course. So yeah, The House of Bernarda Alba. Right, let's see what else we got. Medieval fantasy, gay romance. Catherynne, maybe? Okay, there's only 3 images. Yeah, then it's Catherynne, right? Catherynne is exactly a fantasy gay romance between prince and, well, actually between 2 princes, because one of the princess takes the other prince captive as his sort of slave, but not as slave, at least not in this particular case of the interaction between the 2 of them. But there is a lot of trigger warnings still for, slavery, just not between the 2 main characters. So you can look out the trigger warnings if that is something that you care for. I really like that book, and I didn't know what to expect. It is a contemporary book, and I found that the characters were very believable. The main prince is a really complex person in a way that is actually believable, and that doesn't mean that you will find him sexier because of that, or that you are ready to forgive him because he's this evil but sexy sort of villain, right? No, it's more complex than that. Honestly, it starts as a real enemies to lovers sort of situation, and the real serious type in which the 2 of them are in a different side of war. Of course, they are princes of the different kingdoms, I think, and one of them starts being betrayed by somebody he really trusted. So he ends up as the other prince's slave without him actually knowing that he is a prince, because the prince that was betrayed is thought to be dead. So there's this dilemma where they don't know each other's secrets and they start hating each other, and of course the truth has to come out at some point, and it's really believable how the romance develops. So yeah, Captive Prince. Something that goes with these themes and vibes. Oh, I'm already thinking of one book. Oh yeah. Yeah, okay. Oh, what the hell is that? Okay, I did not expect this. This is suddenly turned into a sort of Jules Verne sort of stories. That has really thrown me off. Yeah, but honestly, regarding the other pictures, I think I have a recommendation. And that would be Our Share of Night, by Mariana Enriquez. It is a horror story, of course, with fantasy elements, and it is about a father and his child, his son, and the center of the book is the relationship. But as for the plot, the father is running away from a secret cult in Argentina, and it takes place during a military dictatorship. So through the fantasy horror, you learn about the dangers and the secrets of the historical dictatorship that actually took place in Argentina in the 80s, I think. Right, in the 70s and 80s. I just looked that up. So like I said, the father is running away from this cult, but him and his son have this tumultuous relationship. The father is a very troubled man because he was basically raised within this cult, and they were taking advantage of him because he has supernatural powers. He's a medium, is what they call him, because he can access the other side. Basically, there are demons there. It is this very dark and obscure place that they are actually trying to learn more about. So, of course, his upbringing was not very good. And that translates into the way he treats his son. So throughout the journey, you meet them and see how the relationship develops and how the father tries to keep his son safe, but just doesn't know how to communicate how much he loves him, really. And you see in the book, you have the perspective of the father, but also the perspective of the son, and some chapters about the past and the origins of the cult that they are running away from. So yeah, our share of the night, Jesus. Family saga from the 19th century. Very opulent, basically. That's not 19th century. I mean, this is Pride and Prejudice. This picture right here looks like a particular scene in the movie adaptation of Pride and Prejudice. But I'm not going to recommend that. Everybody's read that. Let's try to find something else, because I cannot think at the moment about something that feels so opulent, you know. When God was women. God was women. There is nothing weak about your femininity. Is it time to recommend one of my absolute favorite books? I think so. Okay, I'm recommending Paradise Lost. There are no goddesses there, but it is a Christian... Honestly, it is a fanfic about Christianity, okay? I have no doubt about that. The writer is John Milton, and it is one of my favorite books because it feels very feminist, to be honest. This to me, and the interpretation that I take from that book, which is very different from one person to another. So that is one of the strongest points of the book, for sure. Paradise Lost is about the story of Adam and Eve on one hand, and on the other hand, it is about the exile of Lucifer, Satan, because he, of course, rebels against God with his soldiers, his angel soldiers that side with him, and he ends up in hell, and he tries to take revenge on God, right? He tries to convince Eve that she's more than God and Adam convince her she is, because she is supposed to be there to serve Adam. And of course, she was created from his rib, so she's only a companion to him. But in this take, Lucifer is this feminist icon. So in this take, we see a side of Lucifer, a literary, fictional side, that is very relatable, is what I would say. He feels very introspective, he feels nuanced, and just sad that he didn't succeed. And honestly, my interpretation of him rebelling against God is that he was very jealous of his new creation, of God's new creation, which are Adam and Eve. He thinks that he was left behind, and all the angels were left behind for this new and better creation created on his image, right? Also, my take is that Lucifer rebels against authoritarianism, or whatever that word is pronounced, because of course in this universe God is supposed to dictate how everybody has to behave, so it feels like an atheist story, and a lot of people consider it that way, and it is a heavily studied book, and that's what I like about it. Whatever the person is, they will have their own interpretation of it and a lot of things to take from it. I'm sure that if you are Christian, you will probably still find something completely different from me in that reinterpretation of the passage from the Bible, which is Lost Paradise. So yeah, I would actually love to hear what you think of that book, if you interpret it some other way. Let's keep searching, right? Just books about people. I love that movie. This one. Books about people. So anything within the literary fiction genre, I would say, because the difference between literary fiction and other genres, as you may know, is that it focuses heavily on characters instead of the plot in itself, or it's basically the genre that doesn't feel like any other genre. It cannot be categorized within any of the others. To be honest, anything by Virginia Woolf would fit in this description, but let's recommend Mrs. Dalloway. Mrs. Dalloway is about a woman in her 50s, which isn't something that we tend to see in books or honestly any other media as well. And we see her whole day, just one day in her life, and that is her relationship with her husband, with her children, her possibly regrets in her life. She also encounters a past lover, someone that she really loved from another point in her life. And just like any other Virginia Woolf book, this has this stream of consciousness, which is the narrative device in which the feelings and the thoughts of a person are described in a way that aren't necessarily really logical. So it's in the way we think in our minds, and it is transcribed like that in the book. It is the first Virginia Woolf book that I read, and I was mesmerized by the way we change from one character's perspective to another, because it doesn't only tell the story of Mrs. Dalloway. And the way she does this is, for example, she's in the park and she sees a young couple across the park sitting on a bench, and she starts to think about them and imagine how their life must be. And you are reading the book, and suddenly you realize that instead of reading her thoughts, you have actually started to read about the couple's thoughts. So we have crossed gradually from one character to another, and so now you are following this other couple's life, and from the perspective of the woman. So it is the most natural way to tell a story, and it really captivated me. The characters feel as real as they can be, and it talks about things like post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, before it even was acknowledged by any doctors, before it even had a name. So that's honestly how wonderful she is in getting into people's minds and narrating their lives. Virginia Woolf is, I mean. So yeah, Mrs. Dalloway. Let's recommend one or two other books, shall we? Romance, Friendship, Secrets, Affair, and Dysfunction. This is just Sex in the City. It is. You know what? I do like this vibe, and I'm gonna recommend a book that does not feel like that TV show, but that is about romance, friendship, secrets, affairs, and dysfunction. And that would really comfort me with Apples by Catherynne and Valente. That novella is about a character named Sophia who lives in a village that is very strange. It seems to be secluded from the rest of society, and on it live only people with animal names. So at the start, you don't really know if she's actually living with animals, or do they get like rebaptized and have to change their names when they become a part of this secluded community? Why does Sophia, the main character, not have any animal name, right? And the book starts with her waking up in her wonderful home, in which she lives with her husband, her partner, and she finds a hairbrush that she has never seen before with black hair that is not hers because she is blonde. And she knows all her neighbors, and they don't seem to fit that description of somebody with black hair. So she starts to second guess her wonderful, safe, and almost primitive life because of this. Is a woman from the outside coming into this village, or what exactly is going on here, right? And on top of that, things start to change for good when she meets a man that is allowed to go outside the perimeters of this village. And he has this mysterious vibe, apparent connection to her that speaks to her soul in some way. And so she starts to make some questions for the first time in her life about her traditional role as his husband's wife. So comfort me with apples. Right, let's take a look at this. A strange philosophical or psychological horror. To you, people are a fictitious creation, a number of expectations generated from their actions. I'm gonna recommend The Vegetarian by Kang. It is about a highly depressed young woman who decides that she will no longer eat meat, basically. She will from now on become a vegetarian. And that causes absolute commotion in her family. She is married, and her husband just cannot accept this new trajectory in her life. And on top of that, she starts to change for the worse because she starts to become very thin. So suddenly her whole family, her sister especially, starts to really worry about what is going on her mind, and just what is it that happened for her to end this way. And as you might imagine, the book isn't actually talking about being a vegetarian. What it discusses is the fact that this young woman is deciding to do something for herself for the very first time without the influence of no one else. And boba. Uy, que se cae. So we soon realize that the decisions she makes about her own body is all she has. And even on that matter, others form an unwanted opinion and try to tell her what to do and what not to do. It is a very sad story about the oppression of women, and it is narrated by three different characters, which are the husband, her sister's husband, and her sister herself. And as you may notice, what's notable is that it is never told from the perspective of the main girl, the main woman, which creates this irony that I think is intended, because we never hear her voice. She never gets to voice her thoughts. Okay, so let's end it there for now, shall we? Those would be, I don't know how many recommendations those were, but I think it's a fair amount, just good enough for now, right? So if you liked it, consider subscribing. I will post another video as soon as possible. And of course, I talk about books. As you might have seen, I like horror, I like classics, I like literary fiction, speculative fiction, and we're lit in general. So that was all. Thank you very much for watching the video, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.